The night a child whispered, "Doggy," and a town found hope. When the storm swept across Granite Hollow, everyone knew it was dangerous. But no one expected a child to be left behind in the snow. 6-year-old Lila disappeared into the blizzard, her cries lost to the wind. By midnight, most believed she was gone forever. Then came Valor. His handler, Officer Claire Donovan, trusted his instincts when no one else did. Through snow that blinded headlights and winds that silenced voices, Valor pulled forward, driven by something beyond training, driven by loyalty. What he uncovered beneath the frozen drifts would silence a crowd, bring tears to hardened men, and remind the world of the simple word a child whispered when she opened her eyes again. Doggy. This isn't just about a rescue. It's about the way animals carry us through our darkest hours. The way a dog's love refuses to let us go, even when the world has... You'll want to watch until the end, because the moment Lila's hand touched Valor's fur is something you'll never forget. The Wyoming Rockies stretched endlessly, their jagged peaks buried beneath thick layers of snow. The sky above carried the stillness of a held breath, gray clouds pressing down on the ridgelines like a heavy hand. The valley trail was narrow, carved between walls of pine trees, whose branches bent low under the weight of winter. The crunch of boots on hardened snow was the only sound that broke the hush of the mountain. 6-year-old Lila stumbled along that trail, her small legs straining to keep pace. The scarf wound clumsily around her neck had frozen stiff with her own breath, crystals of frost glittering against her pale cheeks. Each step was a battle against the cold that bit through her thin jacket. She reached for her mother's hand, her mitten slipping into the worn leather of her mother's glove. But her mother's grip was weak, distracted, as though her thoughts were far away. Up ahead walked Carl, Lila's stepfather. His strides were long, purposeful, irritated by the slow pace of those behind him. His heavy coat flared open as the wind picked up, revealing a man whose jaw was set hard as the ice beneath their feet. Every few yards he glanced back, not with concern but with impatience, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Lila dragging her feet. "Hurry up," he barked, voice rough and cold as the wind. "We don't have all night." Lila's small voice tried to rise above the crunch of snow. "I'm tired, Carl. It hurts to walk." She tugged gently at her mother's sleeve, her breath forming tiny clouds in the fading light. Carl didn't answer. His shoulders stiffened and he picked up the pace as though to punish her with distance. Lila's words dissolved into the air like snowflakes vanishing on stone. Her mother offered only a fleeting glance, guilt in her eyes. But she said nothing. The silence pressed heavier than the storm. The trail wound higher, the air thinning. Each gust of wind carried the promise of something darker, colder. The trees moaned as their branches swayed, and far off, a crow called once before disappearing into the gray. The mountains seemed to lean in, listening, waiting. Lila's boots sank deeper into the drifts. She tried to quicken her steps, afraid of being left behind, but her body ached from the cold. Her toes burned first, then went numb. She whispered softly, "Mommy, it's so cold," her lips trembling. But her mother's answer was lost, swept away by a sudden burst of wind. Carl's voice cut through the gust. "Keep moving. The cabin's just ahead." He said it as if it were fact, though no roofline appeared, no lantern light broke the gloom. He spoke like a man who demanded belief without proof. The path narrowed between two ridges of rock. The snow that clung to them slipped in sheets, tumbling into the trail with muffled thuds. Lila pressed closer to her mother, clutching her coat, eyes wide at the sound. The mountain was shifting around them, groaning like something alive. And still, Carl did not slow. Then it began. Not suddenly, but with a subtle shift in the air. The wind, once steady, changed direction, curling around them like a predator circling its prey. The first flakes of a new storm fell silently, large and heavy, melting against Lila's lashes. She blinked them away, her little heart racing at the way the world blurred. The silence of the mountain was no longer still. It was waiting, gathering. Carl muttered something under his breath, glancing skyward. He knew as well as anyone what it meant. Storms in the Rockies did not forgive. But pride burned hotter than fear in his chest, and he pushed forward. To turn back would be to admit weakness, and Carl could not bear the weight of that. Lila coughed, her breath ragged. She stumbled over a root, hidden beneath the snow, her knees buckling. She let out a cry, soft, desperate. But Carl's boots marched on. Her mother crouched quickly, brushing snow from Lila's coat, murmuring words that held little comfort. The woman's eyes darted to Carl, silently pleading for patience, but he did not look back. The snow thickened, the air filled with white, flakes whirling faster, heavier, swallowing the trail ahead. The horizon vanished, erased by the storm's hand. The world had become smaller, just the path beneath their feet, the trees leaning close, and the sound of the wind clawing at their coats. Lila clung tighter to her mother's hand. Her cheeks were raw, her eyes watering, but beneath her fear was something quieter, a yearning. She wished for warmth, for the steady arms of the father she could barely remember, for a voice that would tell her she was safe. But all she had was Carl's shadow, pulling further ahead, his back turned, his heart colder than the storm itself. "Please, Carl," her mother finally called out, voice strained. "She can't keep up." Carl stopped, his boots planted firm, shoulders tense. He turned, his face half hidden by the scarf pulled across his mouth, but his eyes were sharp, accusing. "If we stop, we'll freeze out here. She has to walk." His gaze flicked to Lila, not with worry, but with something harsher, a judgment. Then he turned again, boots pounding against the snow, each step dismissing them. The mountains seemed to close around them then. The storm's first real howl echoed through the valley, rattling the trees. Snowflakes whipped sideways, striking skin like needles. The silence was gone, broken, replaced by the voice of the blizzard rising, growing stronger. Lila shivered violently, her little body pressed against her mother. Tears froze at the corners of her eyes. She wanted to cry out again, to beg Carl to wait, but the words stuck in her throat. She felt too small, too unheard, as if the mountain itself had swallowed her voice. The trail wound on into whiteness, and the storm followed, hungry. The storm grew teeth. Wind tore through the trees, scattering snow like shards of broken glass, stinging cheeks and burning eyes. The trail that had once seemed narrow now looked endless, swallowed whole by white. Carl pressed forward, head bent, one hand gripping the collar of his coat, as though to shield himself from the fury above. His boots crushed the drifts with a rhythm that was more command than step, impatient, merciless. Behind him, his wife and the little girl struggled to follow, their shapes shrinking against the rage of the mountain. "Carl, slow down," his wife cried, her voice thin against the howl of the wind. She tightened her grip on Lila's hand, dragging the child forward, but every step seemed to cost more than the last. Carl didn't answer. He heard her, of course, but in his mind there was no room for slowing, no room for weakness. The storm was an adversary he could not afford to bow to. He convinced himself that the cabin waited just beyond the next ridge, its chimney smoke curling against the gray. If he could reach it first, the others would follow. That was how he justified his distance, by telling himself survival required it. Lila stumbled. Her small boots sank into a drift deeper than her knees, and she gasped as the snow clutched at her legs, pulling her down. She fell forward onto her hands, the icy powder biting into her wrists, and cried out. "Mama," she whimpered, but the wind carried her plea away. Her mother dropped to her knees beside her, brushing snow from her coat, lifting her trembling body upright. "It's all right, sweetheart," she whispered urgently, though her own voice cracked. "Just a little farther." But Carl had not stopped. His broad back moved steadily ahead, fading into the grey wall of snow. He threw one glance over his shoulder, eyes narrowing at the sight of them lagging behind. Then, with a grunt, he pressed on faster. "She has to walk," he shouted, though the storm nearly stole his words. "If we stop, we're done." His wife tried to call back, but the words froze on her lips. Her lungs burned from the cold, her arms heavy from holding Lila up. She could see the strain in Carl's face, his pride, his anger, but also something harder, his refusal to bend. Lila clung to her mother's side, her mittened hand slipping as the wind shoved them. "I'm tired, Mama," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "I know, baby. I know." The mother kissed the top of her daughter's frozen hair and urged her forward. "We're right behind him. Just keep moving." The snow thickened, a blinding curtain that turned every direction into sameness. Lila's world shrank to the weight of her mother's hand and the sting of snow against her lashes. Her legs shook, her breath came in ragged sobs, but she kept stumbling forward, one small step after another. Then it happened. The wind roared in a sudden burst, shoving them sideways. Lila lost her grip on her mother's hand. Her foot slid into a hidden dip in the trail, and she pitched forward into the snow. Her mother spun, reaching back, but the storm struck again, a wall of white that swallowed them whole. For one frozen second, Lila was there, half buried, her little arms flailing. And in the next, she was gone, lost in the blinding swirl. "Lila!" her mother screamed, panic shredding her throat. She dropped to the ground, crawling through the snow, arms sweeping wildly. "Lila!" But Carl didn't stop. He paused for half a heartbeat, turning his head at the faint sound of his wife's cry. Through the veil of snow, he thought he glimpsed her bending low, thought he saw a small figure fall behind. But he convinced himself otherwise. "She'll catch up," he muttered, teeth clenched. "They'll manage." His boots bit deeper into the trail, his body hunched forward. Each step was a refusal to turn back, a denial of the guilt that threatened to break through. The storm closed in behind him, erasing the space where Lila had been. For the little girl, the world was suddenly quiet. Snow muffled the storm as she lay half-buried, her mittened hands clawing weakly at the powder. She tried to push herself up, but her legs felt heavy, numb. She opened her mouth to call out again, but the wind filled it with ice. Her voice was a whisper, softer than the storm. "Mama." Her mother's frantic hands searched the snow, but the storm blinded her, pushed her down. She shouted Carl's name, begged for his help. But Carl was gone, his figure dissolving into the blizzard, his mind fixed on the cabin he believed was near. He didn't hear her voice, or perhaps he chose not to. To him, stopping meant failure, meant danger. He told himself that if he kept moving, they would find their way. That if Lila had stumbled, she would rise again. That someone else would notice if she didn't. And in that moment, with that choice, he sealed her fate. The storm raged louder, a predator's howl echoing across the mountains. Snow swallowed Lila's small form, her breath shallow, her lips trembling blue. The silence of the mountain had given way to the roar of neglect, and the little girl was left behind, alone in a world of white. Her mother's cries tore through the blizzard, raw and desperate, but the sound could not reach Carl. He was already too far, too lost in his own stubbornness. And the mountain listened, cold and unyielding, as if recording the choice that had just been made. At first, Lila didn't understand. One moment her mother's hand had been there, warm through the thick glove, pulling her forward, and the next, nothing. Just snow, spinning endlessly, and the sound of her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. She stumbled, her knees sinking deep into the drift. She pushed herself up with mittened hands, but her mother's shape had vanished into the storm. Ahead, where Carl's back should have been, there was only a gray blur. She opened her mouth, and a cry tore out of her throat. "Mama!" The word flew upward, stolen immediately by the wind. No answer came back, only the howl of the blizzard, mocking, carrying her voice into emptiness. Her chest burned. She screamed again, louder, but her voice broke, ragged and thin against the storm. The sound seemed to fall at her feet, disappearing before it reached anyone. Her little heart pounded harder. She turned in a circle, searching for familiar shapes, but the mountain had erased them all. Snowflakes lashed her cheeks, sharp as needles. She held her arms up to block them, blinking furiously as they clung to her lashes and melted into icy water. Each breath she drew was like swallowing glass, cold and painful, cutting her throat. Her boots, far too big for her small feet, sank with every step she tried to take. The snow pulled at her legs like invisible hands, heavy and unrelenting. "Mama!" she cried again, weaker this time, her voice trembling. "Carl!" Nothing. The silence that followed was worse than the wind. It was the silence of being unheard, of being left behind. Panic filled her chest. She began to run, or tried to. Her little arms flailed as she trudged through the drifts, but each step dragged her deeper into exhaustion. The storm seemed to laugh, pushing her back with every gust. She tripped, fell forward, snow stuffing into the hood of her coat, down her neck, biting her skin. She gasped, scrambling upright, sobs tearing from her throat. She was alone, truly alone. Her tears froze at the corners of her eyes. She swiped them away with clumsy mittens, leaving red streaks on her cheeks. Her breath came in short, desperate bursts. Every shadow of the trees seemed alive, bending toward her, whispering in voices only the storm could create. The world spun, and for a moment she thought she saw her mother's face ahead, soft, blurred, reaching out. "Mama?" she whispered, staggering toward it. But when she blinked, it was gone. Just snow and grayness, stretching forever. Her strength gave way. She sank to her knees, shivering violently. The cold gnawed into her bones, deeper than pain, settling in her chest. She remembered something from a school lesson, a story of how snow could trick you into sleeping, how you could close your eyes and never wake again. She was too young to understand science, but she understood the danger. Her small voice broke the silence once more, not as a scream now, but a whisper. "I don't want to be alone." She crawled forward, dragging herself toward the dark shape of a pine tree nearby. Its branches sagged low, heavy with snow, offering the smallest shelter against the storm. She pushed beneath it, curling her tiny body against the rough trunk. The bark scratched her cheek, but it felt solid, something real in a world that was vanishing. Her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She rocked slightly, the way her mother used to soothe her after nightmares. Her lips trembled as she whispered to herself, over and over, "It's okay. It's okay. They'll come back. Mama will come back." The words fogged the air, then vanished. She clung to them like a lifeline, repeating them even when her throat burned from the cold. The more she said them, the less she believed them, but she had nothing else. The storm pressed in harder. Snow blew sideways, slipping through the branches, dusting her shoulders and hair. Her hood fell back, and icy flakes tangled in her curls, melting into droplets that froze against her scalp. She buried her face into her knees, trying to make herself smaller, trying to pretend she was invisible to the storm. The world outside her small shelter groaned and wailed, a chorus of the mountain itself. The pines bent and snapped, sending echoes through the valley. It was as if the land was alive, uncaring, watching her struggle with indifferent eyes. Her lips moved again, softer now, almost without sound. "Daddy, please." The words slipped out unbidden, a memory from long ago. She barely remembered him, only the warmth of his arms and the lullabies he used to sing. But in the storm, the memory rose like a fragile flame. She imagined him beside her, imagined his coat around her shoulders, imagined him carrying her home. Her chest shook with sobs. "Please, don't leave me." Her eyelids grew heavy. She fought to keep them open, blinking rapidly, knowing somehow that sleep was dangerous. She pinched her tiny fingers into her coat, holding herself, clinging to the scratch of bark against her cheek to stay awake. But every minute felt like an hour. She whispered one last time, to herself, to the storm, to anyone who might be listening. "Mama, doggy." Then she curled tighter, her breath shallow, as the storm raged on. The mountain swallowed her voice, leaving only the howl of the wind. The sheriff's station sat at the edge of town like a lone sentinel, its windows glowing faintly against the curtain of falling snow. By dusk, the storm had swallowed the streets, muffling the crunch of tires and boots beneath its weight. Inside, the old wood-paneled walls seemed to groan with every gust rattling the glass, as if the building itself felt the strain of the night to come. Officer Claire Donovan sat at her desk, shoulders stiff, eyes scanning the storm reports pinned to the bulletin board. She had grown up in Wyoming winters. She knew their cruelty, how fast the temperature could plummet, how a gentle flurry could sharpen into a knife-edged gale within an hour. But even she felt unsettled tonight, as though the mountain was hiding something darker in its breath. The phone rang. Sharp. Urgent. She picked it up on the first ring. A woman's voice, breaking. "My daughter. Lila. She's only 6. She's lost out there. We can't find her." The sob caught in her throat, desperate and raw. Claire froze for half a second. 6 years old, alone, in this storm. Her chest tightened, but her voice came steady. "Ma'am, slow down. Tell me where you last saw her." The details spilled out in fragments. A trail toward a cabin, the stepfather pressing them to keep moving, the girl falling behind. Words tangled with tears, until Claire could barely piece them together. But one truth rang clear. A child was out there, in the blizzard, and time was running out. Claire stood so abruptly, her chair scraped against the floor. She barked orders before the phone even hit the receiver. "Missing child, 6 years old. Last seen on the North Ridge Trail. Get every available unit." Her voice carried through the station, sharp as the crack of a whip. Within minutes, the room filled. Deputies, volunteers, and townsfolk who had heard the news gathered, shaking snow from their coats, stamping their boots. Faces were pale beneath the harsh yellow light, eyes darting between one another. Fear clung to them like the frost in their beards. A rancher named Tom muttered near the door, "No child lasts long in this kind of cold. Not after dark." His words dropped heavy, and for a moment, silence fell. An older woman clasped her hands tight, whispering, Lord, have mercy on her. The air was thick with doubt, a tangible weight pressing on everyone in the room. The mountain had claimed lives before, and the storm outside was merciless. Even seasoned searchers shifted uneasily, exchanging looks that spoke what they didn't want to say. The odds were slim. Claire slammed her palm against the table, the sound sharp enough to make heads turn. Her eyes, dark and fierce, swept the room. "We're not here to discuss odds," she snapped. "We're here to bring that little girl home. She's out there waiting for us, and I won't have this town sitting on its hands while she freezes." A hush followed. For a heartbeat, only the storm's howl outside filled the silence. Then, someone near the back murmured, "But the ridge trail, it's suicide in this weather." Claire's jaw tightened. She took a step forward, her voice lower now, but burning with conviction. "I've been on those trails since I was a child. I know their dangers. But I also know this. If we wait until morning, we'll be recovering a body, not saving a child. Is that what you want?" No one answered. The truth was too bitter. Her gaze softened just a fraction. She let out a breath, steadying herself, and then added, "Her name is Lila, 6 years old. Right now she's terrified, cold, and praying for someone to come. We are her only chance, and I'll be damned if I let her down." The room shifted. Shoulders straightened. Doubt turned, little by little, into resolve. From her desk, Claire grabbed the search maps, spreading them across the table. "We'll split into teams. Radios on Channel 4. Marked perimeters here, here, and here." Her finger tapped the ridgelines. "Visibility will be poor, so stay in pairs. Check every drift, every tree line. She's small. She could be buried, hidden. Don't assume she'll be moving." Her German shepherd, Valor, rose from his place by the door, as though understanding his cue. He padded forward, tail stiff, amber eyes gleaming with alertness. Claire's hand brushed his head briefly. "Valor and I will take point on the ridge trail. He'll pick up what we can't see." Tom, the rancher, hesitated. "That dog might find what we can't." But even so, he didn't finish the sentence, but his doubt lingered in the air. Claire turned on him, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. "Tom, if it were your granddaughter out there, would you want us sitting here, weighing her chances? Or would you want us fighting for every breath she has left?" Tom swallowed hard. His eyes dropped, and he gave a single slow nod. That was enough. The rest followed. The station erupted into motion. Coats pulled tighter, flashlights checked, radios crackling to life. Volunteers signed their names hastily on the search roster, some crossing themselves before heading out. The storm outside seemed to roar louder, as if it knew it was being challenged. Claire strapped on her snow gear, her breath steady now. She looked once more at the map, then at the faces of the people around her. Fear still lingered, but it had shifted into something sharper, determination. She clipped Valor's harness, the tag gleaming faintly under the flickering light. "You ready, boy?" she whispered. His ears pricked, his body taut with energy. Then she turned to the room one last time, her voice carried like iron. "We don't stop. Not until we find her." With that, she pushed open the station door. The storm struck immediately, a wall of wind and snow that clawed at the room. People shivered, hesitating for a split second. Claire stepped out first, Valor by her side, swallowed into the night. One by one, the others followed. Behind them, the sheriff's station grew quiet again, its glow shrinking against the storm, leaving only the sound of boots crunching through snow and voices calling into the dark. The search for Lila had begun. As the storm clawed against the station windows, rattling them like fragile bones, A quiet presence steadied the room. Lying near the door, head resting on his paws, was Valor. The German shepherd's coat shimmered in the dim light, shades of sable and black catching in the glow of the desk lamp. While the men and women inside argued about the storm, about the futility of searching, Valor simply waited. His amber eyes never wavered, locked on Claire, as if the blizzard outside was nothing compared to her word. He rose slowly, stretching his powerful body with a ripple of muscle beneath thick fur, his ears pricked forward, nose twitching. To the townsfolk, Valor was just a dog. A good one, yes, but still just an animal. Yet to Claire, he was something more. He was the partner who had never once faltered, not in training, not in the field. He was the anchor in nights like this, when human courage wavered. The room fell silent for a moment as Valor padded to Claire's side. His paws were soundless against the wooden floor, but his presence drew every eye. He stood tall beside her, tail low, ears alert. In his stance there was no fear, no hesitation. Where others doubted, he believed. A young deputy whispered under his breath, almost reverent, "Look at him. He knows." Claire reached down, fingers brushing the thick fur at his neck. The contact steadied her as much as it seemed to energize him. His body quivered not from fear, but from readiness, as if every sense was sharpened, waiting for the command to act. His gaze flicked to the door, to the storm, then back to her, questioning but certain. "When do we begin?" The contrast was stark. Around them, men and women debated the risks. Faces were pale, voices taut with doubt. Yet Valor's eyes burned with something else, an eager certainty, a willingness to walk straight into the teeth of the storm. And Claire remembered. Her mind drifted back to training grounds bathed in summer sun when Valor had first been assigned to her. She had been warned about him, too headstrong, too intense. Other handlers had called him difficult, but she had seen something else, a fire that mirrored her own. She remembered the first time he tracked a missing hiker through thick brush, nose to the ground, pulling her with such force she could barely keep up. She remembered the moment he leapt into icy water without hesitation, dragging a boy twice his size to shore, refusing to release his grip until the child coughed and cried out. And she remembered the nights they'd spent together in silence, her resting against a patrol car, him pressed against her side, both of them listening to the lonely sounds of the world. He had never failed her. "Tonight," she whispered to herself, glancing down at him, "we'll do it again." Valor's ears twitched as if he'd heard every word. The storm pounded against the walls, demanding their attention. But Claire's focus narrowed to the dog at her side. She crouched, looking him in the eyes. "We've trained for this, haven't we? Snow, wind, darkness. It doesn't matter. You'll find her. I know you will." His tail brushed once against the floor, a subtle answer. Around them the room quieted. Some shook their heads, skeptical, unwilling to place their hope in an animal. But others, those who had seen Valor work before, stood straighter, reassured by the sight. An old volunteer spoke softly, his voice hoarse with years of mountain air. "That dog's worth 10 of us. If he's going, I'll follow." It spread that spark of belief. Doubt still lingered, but it had lost its sharpest edge. Claire rose, pulling on her heavy gloves, her breath fogging in the chilled air. "We can argue about the storm all night, but Valor doesn't hesitate. Neither will I. We leave now." Her hand clipped the lead to his harness. The tag glinted under the light, etched with his name. Valor. The word suited him. Not just bravery, but bravery for someone else, for the voiceless, the lost, the forgotten. He pressed forward eagerly, the muscles in his shoulders taut, straining toward the door. His eyes gleamed, as if the storm beyond was not a threat, but a challenge he had been born to face. The deputies and volunteers exchanged glances, some nodding reluctantly, others already pulling on their gear. Claire's conviction and Valor's silent promise were stronger than any speech could have been. Before they stepped out, Claire bent close to him once more, her voice so soft only he could hear. "Find her for me, boy. Find her before it's too late." He answered not with sound, but with movement. One sharp pull toward the door, one insistent tug of the leash. His whole body declared what words could not. "I will." And so, with doubt behind them and a storm ahead, Claire and Valor stood ready. The blizzard would not. The storm swallowed them whole the moment they stepped outside. Snow lashed sideways, driven by winds that screamed through the narrow streets of the town before tearing across the open valley. Searchlights cut weak, wavering tunnels into the white abyss, their beams fractured by flurries. Each man and woman who braved the storm carried one, but the light barely reached 10 feet ahead before dissolving into nothing. The volunteers spread out in staggered lines, boots crunching through drifts that climbed past their knees. Radios crackled with static, voices fighting to hold connection in the chaos. "Check near the ridgeline, stay in pairs, keep calling her name." And so they called. "Lila!" The name rose into the night again and again, stretched thin, desperate, then ripped away by the wind. Some shouted until their throats were raw. Others paused, cupping hands around their mouths, but still the storm smothered every sound. Each cry for the little girl vanished like breath on glass, leaving silence that was heavier than before. Claire pressed forward at the center of one group, Valor straining at her side. His body leaned into the wind, nose low, ears pinned back, but alert. He did not fear the storm. He moved through it as if it was simply another obstacle, something to be endured until his work was done. Her voice carried through the gale, steady, despite the sting in her lungs. "Lila! Lila, it's Claire. Call back to me." But there was nothing. Only the crunch of boots and the relentless howl of the wind. Hours blurred into one another. Time in the blizzard stretched and fractured, marked only by exhaustion. The volunteers' voices grew hoarse, their steps slower. Flashlights dimmed, batteries giving in to the cold. Shadows moved strangely in the storm, and more than once, someone cried out thinking they saw a small figure, only to discover it was a branch, a snowdrift, a trick of light and desperation. One by one, doubt crept in. Tom, the rancher, pulled his scarf lower and muttered to the man beside him, "She's too small. A night like this? No child can last." His voice wasn't cruel, just weary, beaten by the storm. Another volunteer stopped, leaning on his knees, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "We're chasing ghosts," he said, shaking his head. "We'll find nothing until morning, if anything at all." The words hung like frost in the air, chilling even further the hearts of those who heard them. Shoulders slumped, eyes avoided each other. The storm seemed to grow louder, as if it fed on their despair. But Claire refused. She stopped, turning on them, her breath visible in great white clouds. Her face was streaked with ice, her cheeks raw, but her eyes blazed. "No," she said, her voice cutting through the wind like a blade. "She is alive. Do you hear me? She is out here, waiting for us. You want to give up? Go back. But I will not." Valor barked once, sharp and commanding, as though echoing her conviction. His body quivered with urgency, nose still searching, pulling toward the darkness ahead. Claire pointed into the storm. "Look at him. He hasn't stopped. Not for 1 second. Do you think he doesn't know the odds? Do you think he doesn't feel the cold? But he's still searching, because he knows that little girl needs him. The group quieted. Some stared at Valor, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the beam of a nearby light. His presence reminded them of what they had nearly lost. Belief. Still, fatigue weighed heavy. The hours dragged on, boots sinking deeper into snow, hands going numb despite thick gloves. Radios crackled with updates. Negative signs on the North Ridge, no tracks near the creek bed. Every report chipped away at hope. Claire pressed forward regardless. Each step was agony, her legs burning, her body aching. But she clung to one truth. If she slowed, if she hesitated, Lila's chances dwindled. She pictured the little girl's face, pale and terrified, her tiny body curled in the snow. She heard the mother's broken voice on the phone, begging for help, and she knew, if I stop, she dies. "Lila!" she shouted again, louder than before. Her throat tore with the effort. "We're coming for you! Hold on!" Valor surged forward suddenly, tugging at the lead, nose driving into the snow. He snorted, pawed once at the drift, then pushed ahead. His whole body hummed with urgency. Claire's heart leapt, but when they dug, they found nothing, only snow, endless and cruel. Still, Valor didn't falter. He sniffed the air, turned, pulled her onward. "Good boy," she whispered, crouching close to him, her hand pressing to his shoulder. "Don't stop. Show me." The others followed, though their steps were slow, reluctant. Some muttered prayers beneath their breath. Others simply trudged forward, too weary to speak. But they moved, and that was enough. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The storm never eased. Searchlights flickered across drifts that looked identical, each mound hiding both nothing and possibility. The cold gnawed into bones, shaking hands and stealing strength, and yet Claire still refused. At one point, Tom pulled up beside her, his voice strained. "Donovan, it's been 5 hours. The men are spent. The storm's only getting worse. Maybe we regroup." She turned on him sharply, her eyes fierce. "If that were your granddaughter, would you go home now? Would you tell yourself you'd done enough?" Tom flinched, lowering his gaze. He had no answer. Valor barked again, sharp and insistent, pulling forward as though to remind them all, time is running out. Claire straightened, voice steady despite the pain in her lungs. "We keep searching. As long as she's out there, as long as there's breath in me, we keep searching." The storm roared, but Claire's words cut through it, and for a moment, even the doubters believed again. The first search wave pressed deeper into the night, their lights flickering like stars swallowed by a merciless sky. Their voices rose once more, calling the child's name into the blizzard, fragile but unyielding. "Lila!" And though the mountain gave no answer, Claire held onto hope with every step. The storm no longer whispered or warned, it attacked. Snow hurled itself sideways in blinding sheets, the wind shrieking through the valley like a wounded animal. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The searchlights now revealed only a swirling white void, as if the world itself had been erased. What little trail remained was buried under fresh drifts, erasing all memory of where they had been. Claire squinted against the gale, her goggles fogged and useless. She tore them away, preferring the sting of ice on her eyes to the blindness of frost. Every flake struck her skin like a blade. She leaned into the wind, each step a battle. It wasn't just snow anymore, it was punishment. A relentless barrage. She shouted to the nearest deputy over the roar, her voice raw. "It's a wall of knives!" The man only shook his head, teeth clenched, and pressed his scarf tighter across his face. Even speaking wasted strength. Behind them, the line of volunteers fractured. One group stopped, huddled against a cluster of trees, their lights dimming in the storm. Tom, the rancher, staggered toward Claire, shaking his head violently. "We can't keep this up. We'll lose people if we push any further." Claire's chest heaved, her body burning with cold, but her answer came without hesitation. "What if we stop? She loses everything." But Tom wasn't the only one. Radios crackled with weary voices, reports of men turning back, boots failing, hands going numb beyond repair. One deputy's voice broke across the static. "Visibility 0. Regrouping. We'll freeze out here." The storm had found its first victories, not in death, but in surrender. Claire glanced down at her partner. Valor crouched low, his fur whipped by the wind, his amber eyes narrowed against the storm. Snow clung to his muzzle, but his focus never wavered. He strained against the lead, chest heaving, determined to move forward no matter what. "Good boy," Claire whispered, her lips cracked and bleeding from the cold. She pressed her gloved hand briefly to his side, drawing strength from the heat radiating beneath his coat. "We're not stopping. Not now." She pushed ahead, valor dragging her deeper into the storm. Around them, the retreat of others was palpable, lights fading behind, voices swallowed by distance. What had started as a dozen searchers had dwindled to only a few stubborn figures. The storm picked them off one by one, until Claire realized she and Valor were nearly alone. The silence of abandonment pressed hard against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to regroup, to live, to fight another day. But she forced herself to see beyond her own fear. Somewhere in that ocean of white, a child's small body was curled against the cold, breaths fading, minutes slipping away. "Not without her," Claire muttered. She leaned harder into the wind, Valor leading the charge, their twin silhouettes swallowed by the blizzard. The storm fought back with everything it had. Gusts slammed into her chest, nearly lifting her from the ground. Once, the wind pitched so violently that she stumbled, falling to her knees. The snow was waist-deep, filling her coat, stealing heat with merciless hands. She gasped as the cold seized her lungs. Valor barked, circling back, pressing his warm body against her side, as if urging her up. His eyes met hers, fierce, commanding. "I'm okay," she coughed, dragging herself upright. Her legs screamed, but she forced them to move. She would not let a dog show more resolve than she did, though secretly she knew it was Valor's courage keeping her on her feet. Time dissolved into the rhythm of survival. Step, brace, breathe. Step, brace, breathe. The mountain became a blur of white pain. She had no sense of direction anymore, no trail to guide her, only Valor's instincts. And yet, through it all, a strange calm took root in her chest. The storm could strip her of light, of breath, of warmth, but it could not strip her of purpose. Every sting, every shove of wind, every moment of doubt became fuel for her determination. She thought of Lila's mother's voice over the phone, choked with terror. She thought of the tiny shoes abandoned in the snow, half buried and frozen stiff. She thought of what it meant for a child's voice to be swallowed by the world without answer. "I hear you, Lila," Claire whispered hoarsely into the storm. "I won't let you be alone." Valor lunged suddenly, pulling her sharply left. She stumbled after him, trusting. His nose burrowed deep into a drift, then lifted, twitching furiously. He barked once, short, urgent, then strained forward again, leading her farther into the teeth of the mountain. Behind her, faint lights of the others flickered, then vanished. She didn't know if they had turned back or been consumed by the storm. But she knew one thing: she and Valor were not retreating. The blizzard howled louder, as if angered by their defiance. Snow slapped against her face, tore at her jacket, clawed down her throat. But she laughed bitterly into the wind, a sound more defiant than joyful. "Do your worst," she hissed. "You won't take her." Valor barked again, louder this time, his voice carrying farther than any human call. It rang out against the mountain, echoing off unseen ridges, a sound of challenge and promise. The storm may have been a wall of knives, but Claire and Valor pressed on, bleeding but unbroken. The storm pressed harder, as if testing the very marrow of those who dared challenge it. Claire bent low against the wind, her legs numb, her body moving more by will than by strength. Every step felt like wading through knives of ice. The blizzard blurred the world into a white, spinning nothingness. Then, abruptly, Valor stopped. Claire nearly stumbled into him, caught off guard. The German shepherd froze, muscles taut, tail rigid, nose lifted slightly into the air. His whole body hummed with intensity, like a bowstring pulled to the edge of breaking. "Valor?" she whispered, leaning close. Her voice cracked, nearly drowned in the roar of the wind. He didn't move forward. Instead, his nose twitched rapidly, drawing in the storm's scent. To any human, the air was a wall of frozen emptiness, bitter and choking. But for Valor, it carried stories, hidden threads of scent woven through the chaos. He sniffed, once, twice, then whipped his head to the left, nostrils flaring. Claire's pulse spiked. She knew this stance. She had seen it before on training grounds, when he caught the faintest trace of a missing hiker's sweat, hours after they had vanished into the forest. She had seen him freeze exactly like this before diving into the river to find the drowning boy. This was no hesitation. This was certainty. "What is it, boy?" she murmured, crouching closer. Snowflakes stung her cheeks, caught in her lashes, but her eyes never left him. Valor inhaled again, deeper this time, then pressed his snout low into the snow. He pawed once, sharply, at the drift, then jerked his head up, ears pricked, nose turned into the wind. The leash strained in Claire's grip as he pulled forward, hard, toward the invisible direction the storm seemed to guard. Her breath caught. "You've found something." The others who remained in the distance called out faintly, their voices laced with fatigue. "Donovan, nothing here. We should head back." But Claire ignored them. She crouched, cupping Valor's face in her gloved hands, forcing his gaze to meet hers. His amber eyes burned, alive with urgency. Snow clung to his fur, his whiskers frosted white, but he looked at her with an intensity that needed no words. "I trust you," she whispered, the wind carrying her vow away. But Valor didn't need to hear it. He already knew. For Claire, it was a choice. Between human logic, which screamed that no child could survive a night like this, and faith in the dog whose instincts had never failed her. For Valor, it was not a choice. It was his purpose, etched into his very blood. She rose, tightening her grip on the leash. "Lead the way." Valor lunged forward, pulling her off balance at first, then steadying her as she followed. His strides were strong, purposeful, his nose cutting through the storm like a compass. He ignored the wind's fury, the biting snow, the cold that numbed even Claire's bones. His world was narrowed to a thread of scent, faint, fragile, yet unshakable. Claire's heart pounded as she stumbled after him. Fabric, she thought. That was what he must have caught. A scarf, a mitten, maybe even the wool of Lila's tiny coat. Something so small, so impossibly faint, that no human would ever notice. But Valor had found it, plucked it from the storm's maw like a whisper in the dark. Behind them, the other volunteers hesitated, their flashlights bobbing uncertainly. Some cursed, shaking their heads, unwilling to follow into deeper snow. "Donovan's lost her damn mind," someone muttered, nearly lost to the wind. But Claire didn't care. She couldn't. Her world had shrunk to the taut line of the leash in her hands and the dog pulling her forward step after step. Every instinct in her screamed to believe him. She thought of the countless drills, the endless hours where Valor's nose had found what no eyes could see. She thought of how many lives they had saved together because she had chosen to trust him, even when reason doubted. Tonight was no different. Tonight, it mattered more than ever. "Find her, Valor," she urged, her voice breaking. "Find that little girl." He barked once in response, sharp and clear, the sound ringing against the storm like defiance. His body surged forward with renewed purpose, dragging Claire deeper into the blizzard's heart. She tightened her coat around her, teeth gritted, her breath coming in ragged clouds. The storm hissed in her ears, promising failure, but Claire clung to one thought. If Valor says she's out there, then she is. For the first time all night, a fragile flame of hope flickered in her chest. This was the moment, the first true test of faith between woman and dog, between human reason and animal instinct. And Claire chose to believe. The mountain might rage, the storm might try to bury them, but Valor had caught the thread. He would not let it go. Valor pulled harder now, his body a taut line of muscle and instinct, dragging Claire through drifts that climbed almost to her thighs. The storm clawed at them, flinging ice into their eyes, but his urgency did not falter. He had locked onto something, and Claire knew better than to question it. Her lungs burned, each breath a searing knife, but she pushed on, her boots crunching in rhythm with his. Then, suddenly, Valor slowed. He stopped just at the edge of a cluster of pines, his nose pressed close to the ground. His tail stiffened, ears erect. He pawed once, then twice, before stepping back, barking sharply. Claire stumbled forward, nearly dropping to her knees. She yanked her flashlight free and aimed the beam where Valor had been sniffing. At first, all she saw was the chaos of snow, blown into ridges and hollows. The storm had covered everything in a thick, shifting blanket. But then her light caught it, a depression in the snow, shallow but unmistakable. A footprint. Her chest was constricted. She fell to her knees, sweeping her gloved hand over the drift, brushing away the loose flakes. Another impression emerged beside it, and another, smaller still. The prints were uneven, some deep where the foot had pressed harder, others faint, nearly erased. "Dear God," she whispered. "These are hers." The sight of them nearly stole the breath from her body. They were so tiny, so fragile. Each print is no bigger than the palm of her hand. The storm had tried to erase them, and almost succeeded, but not enough. Not for Valor. She traced the line with her flashlight, her heart pounding. The tracks wove erratically between the trees, as though the little girl had stumbled, veered, then struggled to keep moving. Half of them were already buried, their edges blurred by drifting snow. Time was against them. Soon, even these faint whispers would vanish. Claire pressed her gloved hand into the snow beside one print, comparing sizes. Her hand dwarfed it. Her throat tightened. The image of a small child alone in this frozen world, cutting deeper than the cold itself. She whispered hoarsely, as if speaking directly to the girl. "You're close. You've been here. Hold on for me." Valor whined low in his throat, circling her, nudging her shoulder with his nose. His eyes burned with urgency, as if to say, "There's no time to waste." Claire rose, sweeping her beam ahead, following the faint line of footprints. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Each step forward was a mixture of hope and dread. Hope that the tracks would lead them to Lila, dread that they might end abruptly beneath a mound of snow. The storm pressed harder, eager to finish what it had started. Flakes whipped across the trail, filling the small depressions as quickly as they were uncovered. Claire cursed under her breath, pushing faster, forcing her legs to keep up with valor. "Don't let them vanish," she muttered, as if her will alone could preserve them. They pushed forward, and with every new footprint revealed, the urgency grew. She could picture Lila in her mind now, tiny boots dragging, body trembling, tears freezing on her cheeks. The image burned into her, fueling every ounce of strength she had left. The storm roared, but Claire shouted into it, her voice breaking. "Lila, it's Claire. We're coming for you. Don't give up." Her words were swallowed, carried into nothing. But she hoped somehow, some way, the little girl might hear. The footprints curved suddenly, veering toward the base of a tree. Claire's light swept across the trunk, its bark scratched where small hands had clung for balance. Her breath hitched. "She rested here," she murmured, kneeling again, brushing the snow away. She could almost see it. Lila crouched against the tree, curled into herself, whispering into the dark. Her hand trembled as she pressed her palm against the trunk, as though trying to draw from the warmth the child had left behind. But there was none. The tree was cold, merciless. Valor barked again, sharp, demanding her focus. He nosed the ground, pulling ahead, urging her to continue. The footprints trailed on, weaker now, smaller, as if the child had begun to collapse. Some were nothing more than the faint scuff of a toe, half-formed and already disappearing. Claire's chest constricted. "She's fading," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. The urgency carved itself into her bones. "We're running out of time." Her voice cracked as she looked at Valor. "Don't lose her, boy. Please." He answered with another sharp bark, surging forward, dragging her into the storm. His instincts were locked, unshakable. Where human eyes would have seen only snow, he saw the invisible trail, the lingering threads of scent clinging to fabric, to breath, to life itself. Claire followed, her body screaming with fatigue, her heart pounding with fear. Each faint footprint they uncovered was a lifeline, fragile, fleeting, but proof that Lila was still ahead, still fighting to survive. The mountain tried to erase her. The storm tried to bury her, but the footprints remained, whispering one truth. She is alive. Claire clenched her jaw, pressing forward with valor. "We're close," she whispered, though she could hardly hear her own voice. "We're close, little one. Just hold on." The storm shrieked around them, furious at being defied, but neither woman nor dog faltered. The footprints, faint and fragile, had given them what they needed most: direction. And with it, the fire of urgency that no storm could extinguish. The world had become a blur of white and silence. Snow drifted heavy over the little hollow beneath the tree where Lila huddled, her small body curled into itself like a fallen bird. The storm screamed above her, but here, pressed against the rough bark, it was muffled, as though the mountain had covered her with a blanket of ice. Her lips had turned blue. Each breath came shallow and uneven, like smoke rising from a dying flame. Her mittens, soaked through, clung stiff to her tiny hands. She rubbed them together, trying to remember the warmth of her mother's touch, but all she felt was the ache of cold sinking into her bones. Her stuffed rabbit should have been here. Mr. Buttons. She imagined him sitting beside her, ears bent, the same toy she had carried everywhere since her father's funeral. She had lost him hours ago. Maybe when she fell in the snow, maybe when the wind tore him from her grip. But in her mind, he was here. "Don't be scared," she whispered, her voice fragile, cracking against the storm's edge. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening to an answer only she could hear. "I'm not scared either. We're just waiting. Mama will come soon." The words felt heavy on her tongue, but she clung to them. Pretend was easier than the truth. Pretend meant she wasn't really alone. Snowflakes settled on her lashes, melting into tears that had already frozen. Her chest shook with a cough, but she pushed the sound down, afraid it would waste the last of her strength. Her little heart pounded too fast, too loud, as if trying to stay alive through sheer will. To keep herself awake, she began to hum. It was broken at first, faint, but then steadier. The tune was one her mother used to sing when the nightmares came. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Her voice was soft, wavering, each note trembling in the cold air. She rocked slightly as she sang, her body swaying with the rhythm. The storm didn't care. It howled above, ripping through the branches, but in her tiny cocoon of snow and bark, the lullaby was all that mattered. Her eyes closed for a moment. She saw her father then, not as he was in the coffin, but as she remembered from when she was smaller. Big arms, warm chest, voice deep but gentle. He had always smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. In her mind, he was singing with her, his voice wrapping around hers, keeping her safe. "Daddy," she whispered into the darkness, her lips barely moving. "Stay with me, please." Her body shuddered violently, a tremor she couldn't stop. She curled tighter, tucking her knees to her chest, pressing her face into her coat. The lullaby faltered, but she forced the tune out again, clinging to it like a rope. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time didn't exist anymore. Only cold, only fear, only the stubborn rhythm of her song. She imagined Mr. Buttons nodding beside her, his button eyes bright, his stitched smile steady. "See?" she murmured faintly. "We're fine. Just have to wait. Mama always comes." But deep down, something cracked. A voice inside whispered the truth, that Mama hadn't come, that Carl hadn't even looked back, that no one was here. A sob tried to claw its way up, but she bit it back. Crying would only make her weaker, so she hummed louder, off-key, trembling, but alive. The storm shifted suddenly, a new gust breaking through the branches, dumping snow across her back. She gasped as it pressed her down, cold sinking deeper, stealing the air from her lungs. She pushed weakly against it, but her arms were too heavy. For a terrifying moment, she thought the mountain was burying her alive. Her lullaby broke into silence. Her eyes darted open, wide and glassy. She stared into the storm, trying to focus, trying to see if someone, anyone, was out there. But the world was only white. Tears blurred her vision. She clutched her mittened hands to her chest and whispered fiercely, as though fighting against the storm itself. "I'm still here. You can't take me." Her teeth chattered so hard it hurt. Her body shook uncontrollably, but her little spirit fought. She began the lullaby again, weaker this time, but still there. Her voice cracked on the last line. "Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird." The words faded into nothing. Her head drooped against the tree, her eyelids drooping. The world spun in grey circles. Still, she whispered one last thought to the darkness, to Mr. Buttons, to the memory of her father. "Doggy will find me." And with that fragile hope, Lila drifted on the knife's edge between sleep and survival, while the storm howled triumph above her. The storm grew crueler as night deepened. The air itself seemed to harden, every gust slamming into the little hollow where Lila sat curled. Snow sifted through the branches above, falling steadily, slowly burying her. What had once been a shelter now felt like a tomb being built around her tiny frame. Her breath came shallow, ragged, her lips were so numb she barely felt them move. The lullaby she had been humming faltered into silence, stolen by the wind. Her eyelids drooped heavy, each blink slower than the last. The darkness crept in, not just from the storm, but from within her. Her body screamed for warmth, begged for rest, and the temptation to close her eyes was like a gentle hand stroking her forehead. Just sleep, just a little while. It won't hurt. Shadows swirled in her mind, curling at the edges of her vision. She thought she saw movement in the storm beyond, dark figures shifting between the trees. For a moment, she believed they were people. Searchers, maybe, with lanterns. She tried to lift her head, tried to call out, but her voice was a cracked whisper, swallowed by the wind. "Help!" No one answered. The shadows only swayed, stretching and dissolving into nothing but snow. Her heart hammered painfully in her small chest. She pressed her mittened hands to it, as though she could hold it steady. Tears welled in her eyes, freezing before they could fall. She bit her lip, trembling, and whispered into the darkness, "Daddy." The word came out soft, broken, but it opened something inside her. Memories tumbled back, of nights long ago when her father's arms had been her fortress. She remembered him kneeling on the floor, guiding her tiny hands as she held a crayon, his laugh filling the room when she scribbled outside the lines. She remembered the way he carried her on his shoulders, her small fingers tangled in his hair as he called her "my little star." Most of all, she remembered his voice, low, steady, full of warmth. A voice that had told her stories of brave girls who could face anything, even the dark. A voice that had promised he'd always be there. But he wasn't. He had gone into the ground when she was barely old enough to understand what never coming back meant. And yet now, with the storm closing in, she clung to the memory of him as though he were only a breath away. "Daddy, come back," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please come get me. I'm scared." The storm howled in response, bending the branches above her. For a moment, she imagined his shape in the snow, a tall figure walking toward her, strong arms outstretched. She smiled faintly, weakly, reaching her hand into the air. "Take me home," she pleaded. But when she blinked, the figure was gone. Only the empty white remained, merciless and unfeeling. Her chest hitched, with sobs too weak to escape. She pressed her face against her knees, trying to hold on, trying to remember the warmth of his embrace. She whispered over and over, "Please, Daddy, please," until the words slurred into one another. Sleep tugged at her again, harder this time. Her body felt heavy, her limbs stiff, but her mind floated strangely light. She thought she heard his voice in the wind, deep and soothing, telling her to rest. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to surrender, to let the cold carry her away into his arms. Her eyelids drooped. The world dimmed, the roar of the storm dulling to a distant hum. The shadows in her mind thickened, curling closer, whispering lullabies she half recognized. She swayed against the tree, her small body going limp. "Daddy!" It was the last word she managed, barely audible, before her head tilted and her eyes closed. For the first time since she had been left behind, silence wrapped around her. Not the violent silence of the storm, but the heavy stillness of surrender. And the mountain, cold and ancient, waited to claim her. The storm wrapped itself tighter around the mountain, a living thing intent on smothering every trace of life beneath its breath. Snow cascaded from branches, filling hollows, burying the footprints of the living and the fragile shelter of the small. Lila's body had grown still, her trembling reduced to faint shudders. Her head rested against the tree trunk, tilted awkwardly, lips parted just enough to release the weakest breath. The cold was no longer biting her. It was inside her, sinking deep, numbing everything. Her eyes fluttered half-closed, lashes heavy with frost. The world was no longer white and furious, but blurred and dim, like she was slipping beneath a frozen river. Sounds came muted, as though from far away. And then she heard it. A bark. It was faint. So faint she almost thought it was part of her dream. A low, sharp cry carried on the wind, breaking against the storm's howl. For a moment, it didn't register. Her small mind, fogged with exhaustion, tried to shape it into something familiar. Maybe her father's voice. Maybe Mama is calling her name. Her lips trembled, and she stirred weakly, her mitten twitching against the snow. Her eyes cracked open, searching. The storm whirled in endless gray, shadows twisting like figures just out of reach. And then, again, clearer this time, though distant. Bark. Her heart, sluggish and weak, gave a single heavy thud. Her eyes widened a fraction, tears clinging frozen to her lashes. "Doggy," she whispered, the word barely forming, the sound no stronger than a breath. Hope flickered, fragile as the flame of a match in the wind. She imagined him, big, warm, with kind eyes. She pictured a dog breaking through the storm to find her, pressing close with a body that radiated heat, keeping her safe. She could almost feel it, the weight of him curling around her, the steady beat of his heart beside her own. Her lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile. She wanted to believe it was real. She wanted to rise, to call out again, to shout into the storm and guide the sound closer. But her body betrayed her. Her arms were too heavy, her voice too faint. She tried once more. Her lips formed the word, though no sound came. "Here." Her eyelids sagged again. Darkness crept at the edges, soft and insistent. The bark came once more, sharper, closer. Or maybe that was her mind making it so. She couldn't tell. The line between dream and reality blurred too easily now. She tilted her head back against the tree, breath shallow, body curling tighter into itself. The faint flicker of hope burned, then wavered, the storm trying to snuff it out. "Don't leave me," she mouthed silently. Her eyes slipped shut again, her consciousness sinking. The bark echoed faintly in her ears, whether real or imagined she no longer knew. And then, silence reclaimed her. The little girl collapsed deeper into the snow's embrace, a fragile figure disappearing against the mountain's vastness. But somewhere, carried by the storm, a dog's voice still called, relentless, unyielding, refusing to let her go. The storm had become a wall, its white fury pressing in from every direction. Claire's body screamed with exhaustion, her legs heavy, her lungs raw from the cold air. She forced each step forward, clinging to the rhythm of her breath, the pulse in her ears. But valor gave her no time to falter. Without warning, he surged. The leash in her hand snapped tight, nearly yanking her off her feet. Claire stumbled, boots sinking deep into a drift, snow spilling into her collar. "Valor, wait!" she cried, her voice lost in the roar of the wind. But the shepherd didn't wait. His muscles bunched, his body lunging ahead with a desperation she had never seen in him before. His bark cut through the storm, sharp, frantic, echoing across the frozen emptiness. It wasn't the steady, disciplined bark of training. It was raw, urgent, alive with the fire of instinct. "Easy, boy! I'm here!" Claire shouted. fighting to pull herself free from the snow's grip. She gritted her teeth and pushed forward, half running, half falling, her hands burning as she clutched the lead. Valor plowed ahead, nose low, chest cutting through the drifts. Every inch of him trembled with focus, his ears strained forward, his tail rigid, his breath billowing in frantic bursts. To him, the storm no longer existed. The cold, the darkness, the doubt. It had all narrowed to one thing, the fragile thread of scent that screamed of a child still alive. Claire's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew this intensity. She had seen it in training exercises when Valor locked onto a hidden target, when nothing in the world could sway him from the trail. But this was different. This was fiercer, sharper, as if he understood what was at stake. "Show me, Valor," she cried, stumbling after him. Snow clawed at her legs, tore at her coat, but she refused to let go of the lead. "Find her!" The dog barked again, a sound that cut into her very bones. She had worked with him long enough to know the meaning behind it. This wasn't just a signal. This was a cry of certainty. Her flashlight swung wildly as she struggled to keep up, beams slicing across trees and drifts, catching nothing but the storm's white rage. The snow was so thick now she could barely see 10 feet ahead. The world had collapsed into darkness and light, Valor's black shape dragging her towards something unseen. Her breath came ragged, words tumbling from her lips in half-formed prayers. "Please, please let her be there. Please let us be in time." Valor lunged harder, his paws striking the snow with explosive force. He pulled Claire down a slope, the leash straining so tight her arm ached. She nearly lost her footing, sliding on ice hidden beneath the drifts. But Valor steadied her with his strength, never breaking stride. "Good boy," she gasped, her voice trembling. "Don't stop. Whatever you've got, hold on to it." The storm shrieked, trying to bury their trail, but Valor answered with another bark, furious and defiant. His whole body quivered as he drove forward, like an arrow locked onto its mark. Claire's mind raced. This is it. This is the moment. She could feel it in her bones, in the way Valor's body surged with certainty. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't hoping. He was leading her to life. She dug deep, forcing strength into her legs, running beside him now, no longer dragged but willingly carried forward by his determination. Snow slapped against her face, burned her lungs, but she didn't care. Her world had shrunk to the line of the leash and the frantic barks that shattered the storm's silence. Somewhere ahead, she knew, was the reason Valor fought so desperately. Somewhere beneath the snow and darkness, a small girl was waiting. Claire's voice rose, breaking into the storm, fierce and unyielding. "Hold on, Lila. We're coming." Her words vanished into the wind, but she screamed them anyway, as if sheer will could carry them to the child's ears. Valor barked again, higher this time, his paws clawing through a drift so deep it nearly swallowed him whole. He tore forward, muscles straining, and Claire followed, her heart hammering so hard it felt like the mountain itself could hear it. Every sense screamed urgency. Every second stretched thin, each one a knife edge between life and death. And for the first time all night, Claire believed, truly believed, that they were close. Valor's frantic pull came to an abrupt halt. His paws dug deep into the snow, anchoring him against the leash, his whole body vibrating with tension. Claire stumbled to a stop, nearly pitching forward, her breath tearing through her chest. "Valor, what is it?" The shepherd barked sharply, then without hesitation lunged sideways into a drift nearly as tall as his shoulders. Snow exploded under his claws as he dug with a force that was almost violent, chunks flying into the wind. His growl rumbled low, urgent, each stroke of his paws desperate and raw. Claire's heart lurched, She dropped to her knees beside him, fumbling with her gloves before yanking them off. The cold hit her bare skin like fire, but she didn't care. She thrust her hands into the drift, clawing at the snow, flinging it behind her in frantic handfuls. Her fingers burned, then numbed, but she kept going. "Please, God," she whispered, her voice cracking. Snow stung her face, melted into her lashes, but she kept digging. "Please let her be here." Valor snarled, not at her, but at the snow itself, his body thrashing as though fighting an enemy determined to keep its hold. His paws moved in a blur, spraying ice and frost into the air. The snow was deep, compacted, unyielding, but he didn't stop. Claire's nails split against hidden ice, her knuckles scraping raw, blood mixing with the snow. The pain barely registered. She dug harder, gasping, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Come on, come on, come on," she begged, each word more desperate than the last. The wind shrieked above them, furious, trying to bury their work as quickly as they uncovered it. But the hole grew inch by inch, carved by the fury of woman and dog refusing to surrender. Claire's breath came in ragged sobs. Images flashed in her mind. Tiny boots half buried. A mother's broken voice begging her not to give up. The thought of a small body lost forever to the mountain. She shoved harder, hands bleeding, whispering through clenched teeth, "Not tonight. Not this child." Valor barked again, sharp and piercing, then thrust his snout deep into the hole they'd carved. He inhaled hard, his body freezing for half a second. Then he whined, high and urgent, his tail lashing. He pawed faster, frantic, almost frenzied now. Claire's chest tightened. He had found something. She clawed deeper, her hands numb and useless, barely able to grasp at the snow. Her arms shook with exhaustion, but she pressed forward, her whole body bent into the hole. "Please, please, please." And then her fingers brushed against something soft. She froze, her breath catching. It wasn't snowing. It wasn't ice. It was fabric, frozen stiff but unmistakably cloth. A mitten. "Oh my God," she gasped. "She's here!" Valor whined louder, shoving his head into the gap, licking at the snow-covered fabric. He pawed faster, determined to free what lay beneath. Claire dug with renewed fury, her bleeding fingers pulling, tugging, tearing at the icy grip. Snow poured into her sleeves, burned against her arms, but she ignored it. She pulled until the mitten came free, and with it, the faintest glimpse of a small hand. Her throat closed. Tears blurred her vision. "Lila," she whispered, the name breaking apart on her lips. The little hand was motionless, icy blue, but it was there. Proof that she hadn't been erased completely. Proof that they weren't too late. Not yet. "Hold on, baby," Claire sobbed, clawing deeper. Valor pressed his body into the drift, his fur brushing her side, his growls fierce as he tore at the snow. Together they carved the mountain open, refusing to stop, refusing to let the storm claim her. Snow piled around them, soaking Claire's clothes, freezing her skin. But she didn't care. She kept pulling, digging until her arms screamed, until her vision swam. "Please, God, don't take her. Not tonight. Not while we're here." And still, Valor dug, his claws scraping against the frozen ground, his breath hot and wild. His body shook with effort, but he didn't falter. His whole being was locked on the task. Save the child. The storm roared louder, furious at their defiance. But beneath it, another sound rose. The sound of claws and hands tearing into snow. The sound of two lives fighting for a third. Claire's fingers closed around the child's wrist. So small, so fragile. She pulled, crying out, her body bending with every ounce of strength left in her. "Lila!" she screamed into the night. "Stay with me!" The mountain didn't answer. But in the pit they carved, the faintest shape of a girl began to emerge. They weren't finished, not yet. Claire's bloodied fingers clawed deeper, her breath ragged, her body trembling from exhaustion. Snow spilled over her arms, numbing them to the bone, but she kept digging. Beside her, Valor tore at the drift with relentless fury, growls rumbling in his chest as though he could fight the mountain itself into surrender. And then it happened. Through the blur of her tears and the storm's swirl, Claire saw it, a flash of pale against the ice. A hand, tiny, blue-tinged, fragile as porcelain. She froze, her lungs seizing. "Oh God," she gasped, the words breaking from her like a prayer. Her eyes widened, heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Valor whined sharply, shoving his muzzle into the hole, licking frantically at the frozen skin. His tongue rasped against the child's hand, his cry urgent, desperate, as if begging her to stir. "Easy, boy. Easy," Claire whispered, though her own voice shook violently. She reached forward, brushing snow from the delicate fingers. They were stiff, frighteningly so, but there was weight in them. Life had not let go completely. Her body jolted back into motion. She dug harder, ignoring the fresh cuts opening on her knuckles. Chunks of snow flew past her as she cleared the girl's arm, then her shoulder, until a small face appeared beneath the frost. "Lila!" The name broke on her lips, trembling with both terror and hope. The girl's eyes were closed, lashes crusted with ice. Her lips were purple, parted just enough to show the faintest puff of air leaving her mouth. Barely there, barely real, but there. Claire sobbed, a sound raw and guttural, half relief, half desperation. "She's alive!" she cried into the storm, her voice cracking. "She's alive!" Valor barked, loud and fierce, his tail lashing, his eyes burning with urgency. He pressed close, licking the girl's cheek, whining as though willing her to wake. His entire body trembled, not with cold, but with the force of his devotion. Claire cupped the child's icy face with both hands. "Stay with me, baby. Stay with me. You're not leaving tonight." Her tears fell hot against the girl's frozen skin. She bent closer, ear hovering over Lila's mouth. The breaths were shallow, fragile, as if the storm itself could steal them away at any second. But they were there. She tore off her coat, shaking, and wrapped it around the child's tiny body. She pulled Lila against her chest, cradling her close, pressing her own warmth into the girl, as if trying to force life back into her. Valor circled them, pawing at the snow, barking sharply, as if demanding they move, as if time itself were an enemy closing in. "I know, boy," Claire whispered, clutching Lila tighter. "We have to go. We don't have a second to lose." The girl stirred faintly, a twitch of her lips, a whisper of sound that barely rose above the wind. Claire leaned in, straining to hear. "Doggy." The word was so soft, she almost thought she imagined it. But Valor froze, ears snapping forward, his body rigid. He barked once, sharp, affirming, as though answering the child's call. Claire's throat closed, tears spilling anew. "She's fighting," she whispered. "She's still with us." The storm raged on, furious at its defeat. Snow whipped around them, trying to bury them again. But Claire rose to her knees, Lila bundled tight in her arms. Her muscles screamed, her skin burned with cold, but none of it mattered. She would not let the mountain win. Valor pressed close to her side, body shielding them from the wind. His eyes glowed fierce, his breath steaming into the night, his stance protective and unyielding. Claire looked down at the girl once more, brushing ice from her lashes. "Hold on, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. "We found you. You're safe now. Just hold on." And for the first time since the search began, hope surged through her, not fragile, not fleeting, but solid. The child was alive. The storm had not won. Together, woman and dog, they had pulled her back from the edge of silence. Now came the fight to keep her there. Claire dropped to her knees in the snow, her body trembling from the storm's punishment, but her hands steady as they searched for life. She laid Lila gently on her lap, brushing clumps of ice from the girl's hair, her gloves forgotten, her fingers raw and bleeding. "Come on, baby," Claire whispered, bending close. Her ear hovered just above the child's lips, desperate for a breath. For a terrifying moment, she heard nothing but the wind howling in her own ears. Panic surged hot through her chest, a scream rising in her throat. And then, there. The faintest warmth brushed against her cheek, so fragile she almost doubted it, but it was there. Her hands flew to Lila's neck, pressing gently against the small, icy skin. A pulse, weak, sluggish, but alive. "Oh, thank God," Claire sobbed, her body shaking with relief and fear all at once. Her tears fell fast, dotting the girl's frozen face. "You're still here. Don't you dare leave me." She tore off the last of her gear, the thick outer coat that had shielded her from the storm, and wrapped it tightly around Lila's tiny body. The child was stiff, her limbs curled in on themselves, but Claire pulled her close, tucking her against her chest. She pressed the girl's frozen cheek to the place where her own heart pounded, as though sheer force of will could restart the failing rhythm of the little one's body. "You hear that?" Claire whispered hoarsely, rocking gently. "That's my heartbeat. Stay with it. Don't let go." Valor whined beside her, circling once before pressing his massive body against the child's other side. His fur bristled with frost, but beneath it he radiated warmth. He curled tight against Lila, his chest pressed to hers, his breath steaming into the space between them. He let out a low, steady rumble. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. A sound of comfort, of presence. Claire felt it then. The heat building slowly between them, her body on one side, Valor's on the other, enclosing Lila in a cocoon of life. It was primitive, raw, but it was all they had. She leaned her forehead against the child's, whispering again and again, "Stay with me, sweetheart. You're not alone. I've got you." The girl stirred faintly, a twitch of her lips, a flicker in her lashes. A breath rattled through her, shallow but real. "That's it," Claire gasped, clutching her tighter. "That's it. Fight for me." Her own body screamed with cold now that she'd given up her coat. The storm bit deep, slicing through her uniform, but she didn't care. Every ounce of her warmth belonged to the child. She rocked back and forth, her arms wrapped fiercely around Lila, her heartbeat pounding against the little girl's ear. Valor shifted, tucking his muzzle against Lila's chest, his body pressed closer. His ears flicked, his eyes fixed on Claire with an intensity that said more than words ever could. "We will keep her alive." Claire nodded at him, tears blurring her vision. "We'll do this together, boy." She pressed her lips against the child's hair, the strands stiff with frost. "You're not going anywhere, Lila. Not tonight. Not while we're here." The storm howled, furious, slamming against the trees, trying to tear them apart. Snow swirled in violent gusts, stinging Claire's exposed skin. But in that small circle beneath the branches, a fragile warmth pulsed, a mother's instinct in a stranger's arms, a dog's unyielding devotion, a child's flickering will to live. Minutes crawled by, each one a lifetime. Claire held her breath, waiting, counting the faint thuds of the girl's pulse against her fingertips. Still there, still fighting. Her own body shook uncontrollably now, her teeth chattering, her skin burning with the cruel bite of cold. She pressed tighter, ignoring the agony in her muscles. "Take me instead," she thought wildly. "Drain my warmth if you must. Just let her live." Valor shifted again, his chest rising and falling steadily, his warmth seeping into the child like a living furnace. He didn't move, didn't falter, only pressed closer, as though his very purpose in life had been reduced to this single act, to keep her heart beating. Claire kissed Lila's forehead, whispering through cracked lips, "You're not alone anymore. Do you hear me? We've found you. And we're not letting go." The girl's lashes fluttered faintly again. A soft, broken sound escaped her lips. A sigh, maybe, or the faint beginning of a word. Claire leaned closer, desperate to hear. But then it faded, and the child went still again, her body heavy against Claire's chest. "No," Claire whispered fiercely, tightening her arms. "Not now. You hold on. Just a little longer." Her tears mingled with the snow, hot for an instant before freezing on her cheeks. She pressed her cheek against the child's hair, rocking her like a mother with an infant, murmuring every promise she could think of. "We're going home. You'll see your mama again. You'll be warm. You'll never be alone in the dark like this again. Just don't stop fighting." The pulse beneath her fingers fluttered weakly but held, and so Claire kept rocking. Valor kept pressing close, and between them, in the heart of a raging storm, a fragile flame of life refused to go out. The child was a fragile weight in Claire's arms, bundled in her coat, pressed against her chest so tightly she could feel each shallow rise of Lila's breath. Every faint exhale was a lifeline. Every pause between them was a dagger in her heart. Claire rose to her feet, legs trembling, snow collapsing beneath her boots. Waist-deep drifts swallowed her lower body, clinging, dragging her down with every step. She adjusted her grip on the girl, whispering into her frozen hair, "I've got you. I won't let go." Ahead, Valor forged the way. His fur bristled with frost, his breath a steady plume of steam. He lowered his body, chest cutting through the drifts, paws striking like pistons. Each movement was a battle, but he pressed on, growling low as though daring the storm to challenge him. "Good boy, clear it out," Claire called hoarsely, her voice ragged with exhaustion. She leaned forward, following the trench his body carved, grateful for every inch of space he opened. Without him, the storm would have swallowed them whole. The blizzard fought back with fury. Snow blasted sideways, slamming against Claire's exposed skin, stealing what little warmth remained. Her coat was gone, wrapped around the child, leaving her body to the mercy of the cold. She could feel her own strength ebbing, muscles screaming, but every time she faltered, she looked down. Lila's lashes fluttered faintly, her face pale as moonlight against the darkness of Claire's uniform. Claire pressed her lips to the girl's forehead, whispering, "Stay with me, baby. Stay awake. I'll get you home." The words weren't for Lila alone. They were for herself. A mantra, a vow, something to fight the voice in her head that whispered she was too late. that no one could survive this storm. She pressed on. One step, another. Her thighs burned as though fire had replaced muscle, but the snow was merciless, clinging, pulling her back into the earth. Each movement forward felt like walking through cement. Her breaths came ragged, loud in her ears, each inhale searing, each exhale a gasp of pain. Valor barked suddenly, sharp and commanding. He paused, glanced back, eyes flashing amber in the beam of her flashlight. His growl rumbled deep, not at her, but at the storm itself, as though he could snarl back the darkness. Then he turned and pushed harder, his body slamming through the snow, refusing to yield. "You fight it, boy," Claire whispered through clenched teeth. "I'll fight it too." The minutes blurred into an endless march. Her arms shook violently, but she clutched Lila tighter, terrified that if she loosened her grip, the child would slip away, not just from her arms, but from life. She bent her head low, her cheek pressed to Lila's icy skin, murmuring nonsense words, promises, lullabies she barely remembered. Anything to keep them both awake, both alive. The storm seemed to stretch the trail into infinity. Landmarks were gone, erased by white. She no longer knew how far she had gone, only that she had to keep moving. Stopping meant death, for both of them. At one point, her knees buckled, plunging her into the snow. The world tilted, and for a terrifying moment she nearly collapsed fully, the child slipping in her arms. "No!" Claire screamed, her voice raw. She forced herself upright with a ragged cry, clutching Lila tight against her chest. Tears froze on her cheeks. "I won't lose you. Do you hear me? Not now." Valor barked again, circling back to her, pressing his warm body against her leg, as if to push her up, to remind her that she wasn't alone. His eyes locked with hers for a fleeting second, steady, burning with a promise. "I'm here. Keep going." Claire nodded, gasping, then pushed forward once more. "One step," she whispered to herself. "One more step." The snow deepened again, dragging at her legs. Her boots felt like anchors. Her breath tore her throat raw, but she staggered on. Each step was endless, but the warmth of Lila's faint breaths against her chest was enough to drive her. The storm tried to bury them, but between Valor's relentless drive and Claire's refusal to quit, they cut through the night. Time dissolved into pain, but also into purpose. The world had narrowed to 3 beating hearts, one strong and defiant, one weary but unyielding, and one so fragile it flickered like a candle. And together, they refused to let that flame go out. Claire pressed her lips to Lila's hair once more, whispering with every ounce of strength left in her. "You're going to make it. I swear it." And step by step, they pushed back against the mountain, against the storm, against death itself. The rescue station's lights glowed faintly through the storm, 2 trembling lanterns in an ocean of white. For a moment, Claire thought they were a mirage, another cruel trick of exhaustion and cold. But then Valor barked sharply, his body surging with new strength as he pulled her toward them, and she realized they were real. Her knees buckled with relief, but she tightened her hold on the child in her arms. Lila's small face was nestled against her chest, lips still blue, breaths so shallow, Claire had to hold her own to feel them. "Almost there, baby," she whispered, her voice ragged. "Just hold on a little longer." The snow fought to drag them down until the very end. Waist-deep drifts clawed at her legs, ice stung her skin like needles, but Claire pressed forward, Valor carving the final path. Her whole body trembled from exhaustion, each step a war against collapse. But when the dark shape of the outpost door loomed ahead, her legs carried her with a strength she didn't know she had. She stumbled onto the wooden porch, boots slamming hard against the boards. The door burst open before she could lift her hand to knock. Medics rushed out, their coats flapping, eyes widening at the sight of the bundle in Claire's arms. "She's here," Claire gasped, her knees giving out as they reached for her. "She's still breathing. Take her." Gentle but urgent hands lifted Lila from her arms. The sudden emptiness made Claire sway, as though her very reason for standing had been pulled away. She reached instinctively, fingers brushing the child's frost-stiff mitten before letting go. The medics carried Lila inside, voices sharp, hurried. "Get the blankets. Hot packs. Now. Clear the cot." Inside, the room erupted into chaos. Yet a strange hush fell over the crowd gathered there. Locals, deputies, volunteers, every eye fixed on the small, motionless form laid out on the table. Breath held, words caught. The storm outside howled on, but inside, silence pressed heavier than the wind. Claire staggered into the doorway, leaning against the frame for support. Her vision swam, exhaustion crashing over her now that the desperate fight was done. Blood streaked her raw hands, her coat hung open, snow clung to her lashes. She looked half broken, but her eyes never left the child. Valor pressed against her leg, his body steady, warm. His fur bristled with frost, his breath heavy, but his eyes burned bright, fixed on the girl as the medics worked. He whined low, anxious, then sat rigid, chest rising and falling with controlled intensity. One medic bent close, ear pressed to Lila's mouth. "Faint pulse. Get me that hot pack now." Another wrapped her tiny body in blankets, rubbing at her arms, her legs, coaxing warmth back into frozen skin. Seconds stretched into lifetimes. Each moment of silence was a knife in Claire's chest. She pressed her hand against Valor's head, whispering hoarsely, "Come on, sweetheart. You fought too hard to stop now." Then, a sound. A weak cough, small and broken, but real. Lila's chest rose with a deeper breath, shaky but present. The room exhaled as one. Relief broke through the silence in gasps, murmurs, even a sob from one of the deputies who had given up hope hours earlier. The medic's voice rang clear, firm. "She's alive." Claire's knees buckled fully this time, and she dropped to the floor, her back against the wall. Valor immediately leaned into her, his body steadying her collapse. She buried her face in his fur, tears hot against her frozen skin. Her voice cracked, barely audible, but full of fierce relief. "We made it," she whispered. Valor pressed closer, his weight solid against her shoulder. His chest rumbled with a low sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine, something deeper, as if he too understood the victory they had clawed from the storm's hands. Claire lifted her head, eyes red, and looked once more toward the table. Lila's tiny chest rose and fell beneath the pile of blankets, her skin still pale but no longer lifeless. The medics worked steadily, their movements precise, their words calm now. The battle wasn't over, but life had returned to the girl's fragile body. Claire reached out with trembling fingers and brushed Valor's collar. "You did it, boy," she whispered. "You saved her." The shepherd's ears flicked, his gaze never leaving the child. His body stayed rigid, as if unwilling to rest until she was safe beyond all doubt. The storm outside roared against the walls, rattling the windows, but it no longer mattered. Inside, warmth flickered again, a fragile, stubborn flame of life. And in that moment, as she leaned against Valor's steady frame, Claire knew the mountain had not won. The medical tent glowed like a lantern in the storm, its canvas walls shuddering with every blast of wind. Inside, the air reeked of antiseptic, sharp with urgency. A small cot stood at the center, far too large for the girl who lay upon it, her tiny body swallowed by blankets and frantic hands. Temperature's 74, a medic barked. Slow warming or we lose her. Hot packs, underarms, chest, groin, IV line ready. Gloves snapped, scissors sliced through frozen fabric. Monitors beeped unevenly. The storm raged outside, but inside the battle was against silence, against stillness, against death. Lila's skin was marble white, lips blue, her chest rising only shallowly. Ice crystals still clung to her hair. That she had survived the blizzard at all was a miracle, but survival wasn't yet certain. Pulse is weak, a nurse muttered. Then that's enough, the doctor said grimly. Don't quit on me, kid. Outside, Claire sat hunched on a bench, face buried in her hands. Her fingers were raw and bloodied from digging through snow. Each throb of pain reminded her of the limp weight she'd pulled from the drift. Valor rested at her feet, his damp fur still dusted with frost, his head pressed against her lap, amber eyes flicking toward the tent flap with each muffled command inside. Claire's hand clutched his fur like a lifeline. You kept her alive, she whispered. The storm battered the walls, but Claire refused to rest by the heater. Lila was in there, balanced on a knife's edge. She whispered into the night, into God's silence. Please don't let her slip away. A deputy set a thermos of coffee beside her. You and that dog, you brought her back. No matter what happens, you did that. Claire shook her head. Not until I hear it from the doctor. Minutes stretched into hours. Each monitor beep stabbed her chest. Each silence made her heart stop. She leaned her forehead into Valor's fur, whispering again and again, She's strong. She'll fight. She has to. Suddenly a sharper voice carried from inside. Temperature climbing, 78 and stable. Claire exhaled, trembling with relief. She's fighting back. Valor's tail thumped once, steady as a heartbeat. Still, the fight wasn't over. She waited, body aching, hope fragile but alive. The tent glowed like a fragile beacon in the storm. At last, the storm softened to a restless murmur. Snow tapped against the canvas, no longer claws but fingertips. Inside, the air was heavy with heat and disinfectant. Wrapped in blankets, Lila lay pale and still. Hours of tense labor had raised her temperature degree by degree. Each breath was a victory. But now all waited for a sign she was truly returning. Then it came. Her eyelashes fluttered. Once, then again. A nurse whispered, She's trying. Her eyes cracked open, glassy, unfocused. Claire froze in the doorway. Lila? The girl's lips parted with a tiny sound. Beside her cot, Valor lifted his head at once, ears pricked, gaze locked on hers. Her trembling hand rose weakly from the blankets, reaching. Valor leaned forward instantly, muzzle pressing into her fingertips, breath warm on her frozen skin. A soft whine rumbled in his chest. Her lips formed a single word. Fragile. Holy. Doggy. Claire's knees buckled. Tears spilled hot down her face. Even the medics, hardened by years of emergencies, paused in silence at the sound. Valor pressed closer, licking her hand gently. His body trembled, ears flattened, tail sweeping once across the floor. Lila's fingers curled faintly into his fur, anchoring herself to him. You're safe now, Claire whispered. He found you. But the girl's gaze stayed only on the shepherd. Doggy, she breathed again, before exhaustion closed her eyes. The room remained hushed, sacred. Everyone knew they were witnessing not just survival, but the birth of a bond that would never break. Claire sank onto the stool beside the cot, her hands trembling. Tears streaked her raw skin. Valor lowered himself onto the ground, laying his muzzle gently against Lila's palm. Her fingers twitched faintly, curling in his fur. The lead doctor finally exhaled. Temperature's stable. She's going to recover. The words fell like a miracle. Shoulders sagged. Someone muttered, "Thank the Lord." Even the toughest rancher swiped roughly at his eyes. Claire let out a half laugh, half sob, brushing a strand of damp hair from Lila's forehead. "You're going to be just fine," she whispered. Valor didn't move, his breath steady against Lila's hand. A low whine escaped, soft and content. Claire rested her hand on his back. "You did it," she whispered. The tent had become a sanctuary, its silence filled with gratitude. Outside, the mountain sighed as the storm finally relented. Claire pressed her forehead against Valor's neck. "We made it," she whispered. And in the center of it all, a girl, a dog, and the quiet miracle of survival. The morning after the storm, Granite Hollow stirred with an energy no one expected. Inside a makeshift cabin serving as a volunteer hub, laptops hummed and phones buzzed non-stop. The air smelled of instant coffee and damp wool, but the real current was digital. Valor's rescue had gone viral. It began with a single shaky video. A German shepherd tearing into a snowbank, claws scraping ice, amber eyes locked on a tiny hand buried beneath. Claire's muffled voice urged him on. "Keep going, buddy. Keep going." The final moment, when Valor froze and nudged the child's limp form with almost impossible gentleness, struck viewers worldwide. By mid-morning, local news anchors were replaying the clip. By noon, national networks were cutting from polished studio segments to raw footage of snow flying beneath Valor's paws. Social media exploded. Comments poured in. "Guardian angel. Heroic beyond words. If every child had a Valor, the world would be safer." Hashtags like #Valor Saves trended across continents. In the cabin, volunteers sat stunned as views climbed. Each share felt like a heartbeat, linking their town to the wider world. Claire scrolled through comments with trembling hands, Valor asleep at her boots, tail flicking now and then as if sensing the storm of attention but choosing calm. When a producer called requesting an interview, Claire hesitated, glancing at her partner. Valor lifted his head, eyes steady. She stroked his neck and said softly, "We'll do it, but let's keep the focus on her." He thumped his tail once, silent agreement. Outside, news vans rolled in. Parents with bundled children gathered, whispering about the dog who saved the girl. Helicopters circled overhead, yet inside, Valor remained unmoved, anchored not by cameras or praise, but by the simple truth. A child had lived. The medical room was quieter now, its harsh chaos replaced by the soft hiss of heaters and the steady beep of monitors. Lila slept deeply, her breath shallow but steady. Her tiny hand clutched Valor's thick fur, even in dreams. Her mother sat slumped beside the bed, face buried in trembling hands. At last she looked up, tears streaking her cheeks as she whispered, "Oh, my baby, I should have protected you. I should never have trusted him." She rocked forward, pressing her forehead to the blankets. "I let you down." Valor stirred at her sobs, lifting his head to nudge Lila's fingers. Even asleep, the girl tightened her grip, as though she knew her rescuer was still beside her. Her mother broke again, reaching out to stroke the shepherd's back. "Thank you," she whispered, voice raw. "Thank you for bringing her back to me." Claire, standing near the doorway, finally stepped closer and placed a hand on the woman's shoulder. "She's alive because of him," she said gently, nodding to Valor, "but also because she fought. She never gave up." The woman met her eyes, voice shaking. "I don't know how to thank you for not giving up on her, for going into that storm when even I thought there was no hope." "Don't thank me," Claire replied quietly, stroking Vala's fur. "I just followed." The mother bent again, pressing her forehead into the shepherd's coat. "Then thank you both, endlessly." Vala released a low, contented whine, settling closer to the bed. Lila's lips parted faintly, whispering in her sleep, though no words followed. Her hand never left his fur. Her mother brushed damp hair from the girl's forehead, whispering, "You'll never be alone again. I swear it." The room fell still. It wasn't just survival they had witnessed, but a miracle. A bond born in the snow that no storm could undo. At the sheriff's office, Carl Hale sat hunched in a chair, damp jacket clinging to his shoulders, pride stripped away. Sheriff Daniels leaned across the desk, his voice sharp with contained fury. "Do you understand what your choices cost this community last night?" Carl crossed his arms, jaw tight. "It was a storm. Things happened fast. You didn't notice your stepdaughter was gone." Daniels cut him off, slamming his fist on the desk. "A 6-year-old, left to the mercy of a blizzard because you thought she'd catch up?" Carl flinched. "I thought she was right behind us. I didn't mean—" "No, you didn't mean it," the sheriff snapped. "But your negligence nearly killed her. And if not for Officer Donovan and her K9, it would have." Silence pressed thick in the office. Outside, townsfolk's voices rose, fueled by outrage. How could he? Poor little girl. Someone needs to answer this. The deputy noted grimly, "Some are already talking about pressing charges." Daniels fixed Carl with a hard stare. "Why didn't you look back? Why did you think a little girl could survive what nearly buried grown men?" Carl's excuses withered in his throat. He remembered the faint sound of her voice, the stumble in her steps, and how he had kept walking. His silence was its own confession. The sheriff leaned back. "You're lucky she's alive. Pray she makes a full recovery. Because if she doesn't, negligence will be the least of your problems." At that moment, the office door opened. Claire stepped in, Vala at her side. The shepherd's amber gaze fixed on Carl with the same intensity that had cut through the storm. Carl looked away, cheeks burning. Claire's voice was quiet but unflinching. "She called for you in the snow, but you weren't there." He was. She nodded to Vala, whose stillness embodied a loyalty Carl could never claim. "Remember that the next time you call yourself a father." The words sliced sharper than any legal charge. Carl's throat tightened, shame flooding his chest. "Take him out back," Daniels ordered. "We'll consult the county attorney about charges." As the deputy led Carl away, the crowd outside erupted. Curses, accusations, the weight of a community's judgment. Carl heard them all. Coward, monster, unfit. The storm had spared Lila. The town would not spare him. In the silence that followed, Vala released a low growl, steady and unrelenting. It echoed the verdict of every heart in Granite Hollow. The storm was gone. Days had passed since the night Valor clawed through the snow, and Granite Hollow now wore a deceptive calm, fresh snow glittering under a pale sun. But inside the medical tent, the battle was still being fought, not against death, but toward healing. Lila lay propped on pillows, swaddled in blankets. Her cheeks carried faint color now, her breathing steadier with each rise of her chest. Beside her, Valor sprawled along the cot, head resting on the mattress. He had scarcely left her side since the rescue. That morning, her eyes fluttered open. She stirred, blinking slowly. When her hand brushed the shepherd's muzzle, Valor nudged her palm, tail thumping once. A small, breathy laugh escaped her lips. Fragile, but laughter. The nurse at her bedside froze, then whispered, misty-eyed, "That's the first time she's laughed since we brought her in." The tent flap opened, and Claire stepped inside, uniform clean, but fatigue etched deep in her eyes. She carried a thermos of broth and a paper bag. Kneeling beside the cot, her voice softened. "Morning, sunshine. Look at you. Stronger already." Lila whispered hoarsely, "Doggy." Claire smiled through tears. "His name's Valor, but I think he likes the one you gave him better." Valor pressed closer, his nose sliding under the girl's hand. She clutched at him with surprising strength. Claire offered him a biscuit. "For a hero." He took it gently, then returned his head to Lila's side, eyes never leaving her. Watching them, Claire felt awe she couldn't put into words. She had worked with many K9 partners, but this was different. This was instinct, a bond forged in snow and silence. Lila's eyes drifted closed again, her fingers tangled in Valor's fur. Claire brushed her forehead, whispering, "Keep watching her." Valor's only answer was the slow, steady rise of his chest as he pressed closer to the child he had refused to abandon. The blizzard was a memory now, though its scars lingered in the drifts outside the county hospital. Inside, warmth hummed from radiators, medicine clung to the air, and footsteps echoed down hushed corridors. In room 12, Lila lay beneath white sheets, her recovery fragile but steady. Her vitals were stronger, her cheeks faintly pink. And at her side, against all policy, Valor remained. When staff first tried to move him, the child's trembling hand reached for him, whispering one word, "Doggy." The moment his muzzle touched her palm, the monitors steadied, her breathing deepened. The nurse who saw it simply said, "Let him stay." So he stayed. Each night, he curled on the linoleum floor, head within reach of her hand. Each night, without fail, she touched him before sleep claimed her. Sometimes her fingers tangled in his ruff. Sometimes they rested against his muzzle. But always she touched him, as though his presence tethered her to life itself. The nurses noticed the difference. Her vitals improved when he was near. Her sleep was deeper, her pulse steadier. One whispered reverently, "Better medicine than any IV." Late one night, shadows stretched long across the floor. Lila stirred in her sleep, murmuring, breath catching. Valor rose instantly, nudging the bed until her fingers brushed his head. She sighed, settled, and slept on. He remained standing, ears pricked, guarding the silence until calm returned. A nurse peeking in stopped at the sight, whispering, "Guardian angel." She closed the door softly, leaving the shepherd to his watch. Claire, standing in the hall, heard the words. Her lips curved faintly despite exhaustion. Yes, guardian angel fit. Late afternoon light spilled through frosted glass, softening the harsh hospital room. Outside, the town still buzzed with talk of miracles. Inside, the world had shrunk to a girl, a dog, and the woman who had carried them through the storm. Claire entered quietly with a folded blanket. Lila stirred, eyes heavy with sleep. But when she saw Claire, they brightened. "You're here," she whispered. "I'm here," Claire said, pulling a chair close. Valor lifted his head at her voice, then lowered it again near Lila's hand. The girl's small fingers curled into his fur, clinging as she turned her gaze back to Claire. Fear lingered in her eyes, fear of being left behind again. Claire reached across the blankets, cradling Lila's free hand. Her voice trembled, but her words carried all the conviction she had left. "You will never be left behind again," she whispered. "Not by me. Not by anyone. I promise." The child's lips quivered into a faint smile. She glanced at Valor, whispering, "Doggy will keep me safe." The simplicity of it pierced Claire's chest. Tears blurred her vision. She squeezed Lila's hand. "Yes, he will, and so will I." Lila's smile lingered as her eyes drifted closed once more, her breathing steady, peaceful for the first time since the storm. Claire leaned back, her gaze falling on the shepherd. His amber eyes met hers, unwavering. In that silent exchange, she understood the truth. She was no longer just a rescuer. She had become something more, protector, part of a fragile family born from the snow. She reached out, brushing her hand through his thick coat. "We'll watch over her together, won't we, boy?" Valor exhaled softly, resting his head against the child's hand, his body a silent vow. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the room, but the promise hung there like a shield, an unbreakable bond, sealed in storm and silence, now enduring in light. The storm that had nearly stolen a life was now only a memory, its snow blanketing Granite Hollow like a reminder of what had been endured and overcome. In the town square, people gathered bundled in coats, their breath rising like mist in the winter air. At the center stood a wooden platform draped with the American flag. Across the front, children had painted a banner. "Thank you, Valor." The letters were uneven, the paint smudged, but the love behind them was unmistakable. Kids clutched handmade signs covered in paw prints and hearts, lifting them high with mittened hands. Claire stood at the edge of the crowd, her uniform pressed, her heart anything but steady. She had attended ceremonies before, commendations, funerals, medals, but this was different. This was about a dog who had refused to give up, a child who had survived, and a town that had found hope in the midst of despair. Beside her, Valor sat with quiet dignity. He wore no vest, no medal yet, just his gleaming coat and steady gaze. Children whispered, tugging their parents' sleeves. "That's him. That's the dog who saved her." Claire rested her hand on his back. "They're here for you, boy," she whispered. He glanced up, then back at the square, as if he already knew. The mayor stepped forward, his breath misting in the cold. "Granite Hollow has faced storms before," he said, voice ringing out, "but never one that tested us so deeply, or showed us so clearly what courage means. We nearly lost young Lila that night. We did not, because of a hero with 4 legs and a heart that refused to yield." Applause burst across the square, rolling like thunder. Children shouted, "Good boy, Valor!" Claire blinked hard, her eyes stinging, but Valor pressed his head against her hip, steadying her as always. "Officer Donovan, Valor, please step forward." Their boots and paws crunched across the frost as they mounted the platform. The mayor bent and slipped a medallion on a ribbon loosely around Valor's neck. The metal caught the pale sun. "For courage in the face of nature's wrath," he declared, "and for showing us the meaning of loyalty, we honor Valor, our guardian, our hero." The square shook with applause. Children lifted their signs higher, voices chanting his name, but Valor stood calmly, gaze drifting not toward the cheering crowd but to the small girl seated in the front row. His duty, his heart, was still with her. The mayor raised his hand for quiet. His voice softened. "Friends, there is someone else here who wishes to speak. Someone whose voice we feared the storm had taken." Every head turned to the front row, where Lila sat, bundled in her mother's arms. Still pale, but alive, her cheeks glowed faintly with health. Her mother rose carefully, carrying her up the steps. The crowd hushed to reverent silence as the child's eyes searched the platform and found Valor. "Doggy," she whispered. Her mother set her down gently. Lila's legs wobbled, but she lifted her arms. Valor moved at once, lowering his great head until she wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her cheek into his fur. Tears spilled across the square. Parents hugged their children tighter. Hardened ranchers wiped their eyes, caps clutched in calloused hands. A microphone was lowered, though her voice was barely a whisper. Stroking Valor's head, Lila said two simple words, "My angel." The words seemed to hang in the frozen air, carried on the winter wind. They struck deeper than any speech. The hush broke into sobs, applause, and cheers that shook the square. Claire pressed her fist against her chest, fighting her own tears. Valor did not move, did not flinch at the noise. He stayed still, amber eyes half closed, as the girl's small arms clung to him. Lila kissed his head, then lifted her gaze to the crowd. Her voice was fragile but clear. "He kept me safe." It was all she said. It was all that needed to be said. The square erupted again, voices chanting Valor's name. Her mother lifted her, tears streaming, while the mayor declared into the microphone, his own voice breaking, "There are angels among us, and today we've seen one with 4 paws." As sunset spilled gold across the snow, the crowd slowly drifted home. Families clutched children, volunteers embraced, and the square grew quiet. Yet something lingered in the air, like the hush after a hymn. Claire remained near the platform, Valor steady at her side. His posture was calm, unmoved by medals or applause. His gaze searched for the small girl who had held him so tightly, ears perking at the faint sound of her laughter in the distance. Claire knelt, her knees sinking into the packed snow. She stroked his neck, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know what you've done, don't you?" Her mind replayed the storm, the vanishing footprints, the silence that nearly swallowed hope, and then the bark that broke through, the paws that tore through ice, the muzzle that found a tiny frozen hand. She had seen courage before, had worn it on her badge, but this was something deeper. "Courage," she murmured, "doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it comes on 4 legs, with fur and a heartbeat bigger than any of us deserve." The words caught in her throat, but she let them fall into the silence. Snow glowed in the last light of day, and above, the first stars pierced the sky like watchful eyes. From across the square, Lila's laughter rang faintly, thin but alive. Valor's ears twitched, gaze locking instantly toward her. His tail gave one slow thump against the snow. Claire rose, brushing frost from her knees. She looked around the emptying square, feeling the truth settle in her chest. "Some angels wear wings," she whispered. Her hand rested on his strong back. "Others wear paws." Valor stood silent beside her, as though he had always known. Together they turned, stepping off the square into the winter night, leaving not just footprints in the snow, but a legacy, the memory of a child saved, a bond unbroken, and the courage of a guardian whose heart refused to surrender. Sometimes stories like this remind us why dogs are more than pets. They're companions who stand beside us in storms, silent, steady, and loyal, in a way words can hardly capture. German shepherds especially carry that gift of devotion. But truthfully, every dog has a heart that speaks in its own quiet language of love. The bond between a human and a dog isn't measured in commands or training. It's in the small moments. A gentle nudge of the muzzle when you're sad, the steady presence at your feet when the world feels heavy, or the look in their eyes that tells you you're never alone. If you'd like to deepen that connection with your own dog, there are some wonderful resources out there that I've found meaningful. One I often share is here. Link. It's not a sales pitch, just something I've leaned on myself, and it may bring you closer to understanding the heart of your own four-legged friend. Take it if it helps. Leave it if it doesn't. Either way, hold your dog a little closer tonight. They give us their everything, and that's a gift worth cherishing.